I remember meeting people that I wasn't attracted to, but I could tell that they were attracted to me, and thinking like, I'm gonna make myself have sex with them. I'm gonna feel worthless and easy for it, but I can already tell I'm gonna do it.
I don't think my family helped me at all, because that just made me feel more shame, and after that I couldn't speak about it.
And because I also grew up super religious, there's also that sexual stigma of, okay, so now you're not a virgin anymore, it doesn't matter how it happened, you're just going to hell.
And they essentially made me feel I was going to go to jail, that I was going to be considered a sex offender.
Wow.
For doing these things when I didn't know what I was doing. I genuinely thought that person loved me.
Can we talk about something? Recently, we've been having some conversations on this channel about hypersexuality, a common yet very taboo reaction to sexual assault, where somebody becomes more sexual, not less sexual, after they experience sexual violence in an attempt to reclaim the thing that disempowered them. This topic came up when I did my video reaction to Glendon Cameron, who made a video where he very bluntly spoke about grooming underage girls. One of the main points that he made in that video is that a lot of the underage girls that he was speaking to were asking for it. They were looking for it. They appeared to be very eager in their pursuit of sex with him. And I recognized that as hypersexuality and said the following.
From 17 to 22, I fucked this chick for 5 years. She was willing. She wanted it.
Let's talk about what probably it really was. I know that from my own personal experience, when you're in a position like that, where you're experiencing sexual violence, a lot of what I was doing after that point was a direct reaction to my trauma. I became hypersexual. And I'm pretty sure that if you were watching me outside looking in, you might see me as being a person who really, 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 really wanted it. The reality is that I was so hurt. I was so messed up from what men had done to me. That felt like the only thing I was worth. And in so many ways, having this much sex, and I can say this now and acknowledge this for what it is now, was a form of self-harm. It was also a cry for help. I wanted nothing more than for someone to step in and say, what the fuck is going on? If you've seen that video, you know that it's a really, really rough one to get through. And a lot of you guys have been asking me how I've been able to watch videos like that and have conversations like this on my channel with such ease. And that's because, especially in quarantine, I really sat with my own trauma, reflected on it, and really kind of started to understand some of the things that I experienced when I was a teenager. But in my exploration of this, one of the answers I haven't come to is exactly how I would have reacted to friends or family members addressing or calling out the hypersexuality that to me was so apparent. I know for a fact that my reaction back then would have been to be very, very defensive. But like I said in that short, I know deep down inside that I really wanted for someone to step in and ask what was going on. But of course, there's a difference between my understanding of this at 31 versus 15, right? So I really wanted to open up this question to my audience. For those of us who have experienced hypersexuality as a reaction to sexual violence, how would you have reacted to somebody trying to help you? And I got some really, really interesting responses. Now, this is once again a series of call-ins for my podcast called True Tea with Kat Black. That is a podcast that you guys can find on everywhere where podcasts can be found. And I really enjoy doing these call-in shows because we get such a large array of perspectives. There were a lot of different types of people who called in to share their thoughts. But even though all these people had such different experiences and came from such different backgrounds, a lot of us told the same exact story. And I think that through a lot of these conversations, we can start to find some solutions for people who are in situations like this or have people in their lives who are currently experiencing hypersexuality. On my first call-in show about hypersexuality, I had a woman named Andrea call in and tell us a story about how she was caught in the backseat of a car with her groomer. You can hear that full call-in show on a previous episode, but she actually decided to call in and give us her answer to this particular question on this episode. And I wanted to play that and some more calls for you right now. Let's get into it. Hello.
I was on the previous call about this topic.
Oh, awesome.
I feel like I have a unique perspective in that I had 3 different groups of people who actually found out about it, and they all had different reactions. And I think that really complicated how I was able to handle the situation. So initially it started out with just my close friends knowing. They were like, oh my God, that's crazy, but they were also there to make sure I was safe. So I would share my location with them, and my friend, and my close friend at the time, was the one that actually came with me to meet him.
Oh, wow.
So, yeah, he was very vital in, participating in it. And I look back on it, and it's like, I really appreciated them for being there for me, especially in not having that shame. But it was also like, you were enabling my behavior quite a bit. So I can't say that it was healthy for me in the long run. My therapist, I couldn't keep it in for so long. I confided in her about it. I think she had the best outlook about it, because she was there to give me a space where I could talk to her without shame, but also where she could course correct for me.
Can I ask what she said to course correct?
What my therapist said was, she was like, how long do you see this going? And forcing me to think past, the present, Because at the point, I think I was really manic, and I thought I was going to die. Like, I was like, oh yeah, this is just going to be the person that's going to kill me. But also, I'm a self-aware person, so while I'm aware that, like, this is me being self-harm, it was also, I knew what was happening was wrong, like I said before, but I also was really delusional. Even in my own personal mind, I couldn't let myself acknowledge it.
What was the last group of people that brought it to you? What did they say?
So my family, because obviously with the police getting involved, I couldn't hide it from my family. And I think this was what damaged me the most, like what hurt me the most. Because I came in with the clear mind of that I knew I was going to be shamed very heavily for it. I was not going to be met with open hearts, because I come from a very religious family. Like, my family had a lot to do with the church. Like, we're Kojic. I came in with that knowledge. I was like, oh yeah, no, my family is not going to react well. Because we had a conversation after I exited the hospital, because when my mother called me, I was like, oh, I can't go back home with her. And I was already suicidal, so I was like, oh, I afraid of suicide. And I was in hospital for a while. And I got out, and my dad came down, and we had a conversation, just 3 of us. And I tried to be as honest and open as I could, even still with the delusions, because I couldn't. It was, at this point, I was really paranoid. Like, I thought he was going to come back for me. I was still struggling a lot. I did open up to him, but it wasn't like I needed a father figure, because I had a good relationship with my father. He grew up in my household when I was younger, and my family split. But I had a good relationship with him. Mostly I would talk about my mother. I was just trying to explain it, and all that. He was more, I could go to him about these things and talk about how I felt. And my father, he was like, dang, like, that really hurt me that, like, you couldn't come to these things, to me about these things. And it's like, I believe the reason why I still went back with him, even though, because I already knew he was right for me. I knew everything, it wasn't right. But the part that kept me going back was that at least he could listen, I think the universe knew that they had to give me all these different people had their eyes on me, because I don't know if I would have ever been able to, like, really break myself out of the delusion. Because I really thought I had so much control in that situation. And I had two parts of myself battling. The part of me that knew what was happening wasn't right and I had no control, but the part that's just like the ego. Like, no, you have the control. You have that control. I don't think my family helped me at all, because that just made me feel more shame. And after that, I couldn't speak about it. I could not speak about it, not even with my friends who had even previously known about it, you know? Like, it just closed me off.
Hello?
I was on the previous live stream listening in as well, and I feel like there's a lot to really unpack when it comes to all of this. But for me personally, I definitely would have been super defensive if anyone tried to say anything to me about anything that was going on at the time. But for me personally, I don't feel like I wanted someone to intervene. I wanted to have control over the situation because I had so little control in my life as a whole. My father was really physically abusive to us growing up. He wasn't necessarily sexually abusive, but he was definitely no sort of really love that you could feel. It was very much, if there was love, it was like love bombing. The interactions are very transactionary. You know, if he does show you any sort of affection or any type of love, it's to get something back in return. So it's really a difficult relationship to even maintain. And as I've become an adult, I've really had to make sure to put proper boundaries in place to protect myself. So because of that, there was a lot of sexual traumatic experiences that I had when I was younger, whether it be like a man grabbing me or like stalking me home or different things like that. And there was no sense of security. I had no sort of feeling of protection. He didn't really care. It was kind of just like a whatever type of situation. And so when I got older, I was raped for the first time and things like that happened to me. I knew I didn't feel safe in going to my family. I didn't feel like that was something I could say. And because I also grew up super religious, there's also that sexual stigma of, okay, so now you're not a virgin anymore. It doesn't matter how it happened. You're just going to hell. So it was really hard for me at that time too, because I'm having to struggle with religious things. And so what ended up happening was after I was first assaulted, I was still a teenager at the time, and I kind of waited until I was like over 18 and then once I was like over 18, I kind of was able to say, okay, well, I'm over 18 now. I feel like I should be able to kind of do these things and kind of reclaim it in a way. And then it kind of went overboard because I never really understood love and affection in normal ways. To me, sexual gratification was the only real love and affection I could understand. And so I was really taking whatever was given to me. And so it really kind of continued over a number of years. And it also really led into some really abusive, toxic relationships too, because I'm looking for love in all these like wrong places and through these wrong ways. And even though in my head I knew it was wrong, I also wouldn't necessarily share it with anyone because I didn't feel safe to share it with anyone. If that makes sense.
It really does. It really, really does. I grew up super religious. We went to Christian private school and there was the whole thing. So I totally get that. You can be so stuck in that religious morality that makes it so that you can't say what's going on with you without being shamed. So I totally get that. You mentioned something earlier about creating boundaries for yourself. And I'm kind of curious what those are, because I understand, of course, sometimes when you go through that, what love is and how you connect with people, you know, I remember when I was younger, sex was just easier to do. And I knew that that's what men wanted from me. And it was very easy for me to have sex with someone and quickly feel like, oh, this person cares about me. So I'm kind of curious if you had that feeling and how that developed boundaries for you as an adult.
Honestly, it can still be a struggle sometimes. So it's kind of a difficult one. So for me, I guess part of the way this could be a blessing and a curse for some people, but really one of the ways that really helped me develop stronger boundaries was getting into the BDSM community. And thankfully, I didn't get involved with people who were as predatory, because there's, you know, for every good person, there's also bad people in that community too. And I know you've talked about that quite a few times, where there's some predatory people, especially when you're first coming into the community, where they look for people who do have these sort of traumas and do have these sort of triggers and really exploit that. And I was really fortunate in that I kind of managed to mostly avoid those people, or when I started to see the flags, kind of just checked out really quick. So because I was able to kind of form better relationships with people who were a little bit more experienced players, and they were really kind of able to guide me in a way and help I don't want to say help advise as to what my boundaries should be, but make me feel safe enough to feel open to be able to say no. And make me feel comfortable enough to be able to say, okay, I'm not comfortable with this. I don't like this type of thing. And it's something that you said earlier too that really resonated with me is using these sexual experiences to relive your traumas. I think I definitely did a lot of that for a very long time, where I would be into such violent things because it made me feel like I was in control of what was happening to me. And I think that's something that maybe is not as always discussed as much, but I really appreciated you touching on, because I know that was definitely an experience for me.
Yeah. For me, BDSM was also a huge component of finding those boundaries for myself. And I'll never forget the first time I sat down and was actually asked, what are the things that you want? What are the things you don't want? What are your boundaries? What are some experiences that you're curious about? And these were all questions I had never had until I came into the BDSM community. Now, outsiders looking at this are going to see a person who experienced sexual violence turning to BDSM, and they're going to be pretty confused by that. What would you say to a person who says, that questions your survival as someone who's gone through sexual violence because you're currently into BDSM?
Well, I would say to each their own,
Yeah.
But for me, I wouldn't know I'm as active in the community as I am anymore. I'm in a married relationship and he's not really into that at all, so everything is fairly vanilla, and I'm okay with that too, because really for me, it was more about seeking intimacy. Yeah. And for me at that time, because sex was more of an intimate thing for me than being intimate, it was easier for me to sort of be able to set boundaries that way. But I would say it's really up to you to kind of explore and figure it out. And for me, it allowed me to just have more control over my sexual life and be able to say, this is what's okay and this is what's not okay. And it's been able to kind of carry me far as that goes. Because I think what a lot of people don't realize is that BDSM at its core is really consent. It's really being able to say, this is what I'm okay with, this is not what I'm okay with. And that was really huge for me as someone who never had that in any aspect of my life.
Hello.
I'm a 20-something trans dude, and I have had a lot of sex. Most of it I didn't want to have, or with people that I found very unattractive. Yeah, I didn't really know the word hypersexual until I was around 17, but I've always been very aware that I was overly sexual more than the other people around me. I think a lot of it came from feeling largely ignored by my parents, so definitely wanting some of that attention, feelings of inadequacy involving my brother, and, a lot of sexual trauma, which of course at the time I didn't consider to be sexual trauma. So there was definitely those aspects, looking for acceptance and love in the form of what was really mostly just a young kid with a lot of older men. So yeah, as you can expect, spending my teenage and young adult years conflating intimacy with acceptance, weighing my self-worth on my sex appeal, having a very hard time or finding it impossible to say no to any and all sexual encounters. I remember meeting people that I wasn't attracted to, but I could tell that they were attracted to me, and thinking I'm gonna make myself have sex with them. I'm gonna feel worthless and easy for it, but I can already tell I'm gonna do it. So, it felt very uncontrollable in that regard. And, it still is a very hard to disentangle what I genuinely want out of sex. I was always so focused on performing, on getting validation, not pleasure or connection. And I think that's something a lot of hypersexual people can relate to, is seeing sex as simply a performance and not something that you do with someone just to get something out of it, to, get some validation or whatever, we do this for. So yeah, many, I always say that I call it running to the finish line because God forbid I find any sort of emotional intimacy with anyone. That's way too scary and vulnerable, and it runs the risk of getting rejected. But if you just run to the finish line with someone, then theoretically you're getting that, closeness, right? I mean, you're absolutely not, but that's the sort of irrational thinking. So yeah, it wasn't until I was about 18 that I really knew what was going on. Years and years of already having sex and engaging in self-destructive behavior, and this is where I started to confide in people about this. So when I first told someone that was close to me, I got a couple of weird responses. One of them was that they were jealous and wished that they could sleep around like that. Which made me feel weird for pretty obvious reasons. And then someone close to me asked if I could just get rid of it, just eliminate it, which I guess I'm a little more sympathetic to that sort of reaction because they see that this is something self-destructive and damaging. And I just don't know if it's possible. I wish I could, but I don't think it's the most productive response as far as trying to help someone through hypersexuality. And as bad as it may be for me, it still kind of made me feel part of myself needed to be eliminated. A part of myself, was wrong and dirty and disgusting. And although I told that to myself all the time, I still wouldn't recommend asking someone hypersexual if they can just get rid of it because it's not very productive.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, as you mentioned, my friends just casually expressing concern for my behavior was, again, I was not having that.
Mm-hmm.
I got crazy defensive and thought I had it all under control because I'd phrase it in my head as it was just another cool, exciting adventure. I have all these cool stories of all this stuff. Oh, nothing's wrong. It's fine. So I didn't want to hear someone say, hey, what you're doing is wrong, as so many other people have expressed, right? So as frustrating as it can be, it's hard to just say that showing concern in the conventional way would be recommended. But what did work for me, though, was distraction, because I have so many other hobbies and things that I'm passionate about, and having my friends help me stay focused on those things instead of, being tempted to go out and sleep with strangers really helped to remind me that, hey, there is a life outside of my sexual history and what I've put myself through. Just gently pushing in the direction of things that I know that I truly love. And it's unfortunate that I have to sit here and say things like, don't make your concern obvious, because at the end of the day, yeah, I only really would have taken that obvious concern from people like my parents, like you said. But, I was largely ignored. My behavior was largely ignored by them. Mm-hmm. I'm just saying, there's so much shame involved in being like this that any sort of direct confrontation can very easily just feel like judgment. Even if you are not judging them, it can so easily be felt like that. So just be gentle, try to encourage and engage them in activities they like more than them engaging in the self-destructive behavior. You said something like, maybe you should be annoying to people who are dealing with this. Maybe you should just, go all in. And I definitely would agree, but I think what worked for me was how people were tactically annoying. And obviously, I still struggle with this in many, many ways, but I have gotten a lot better. I mean, those teenage years were pretty crazy, but that's definitely what worked for me, is just helping my friends, or my friends helping me stay focused on the things that I know that, actually give me a real sense of self-worth and not this fake sort of halfway self-destructive self-worth that I get from, sleeping with random people.
I love that you said that, because that was one of the vague kind of solutions I had in the back of my head. Because, when I think of ways to help the teenage version of me, all I think about is how amazing it would have been for me to have some sort of activity that just dominated all of my time, that I felt really accomplished by, that would have clouded up all of that time instead, And with people who I felt I could fucking talk to, really fucking talk to, because I wanted to feel heard and understood. So I appreciate you for sharing that. And I also appreciate you for talking about, and this is what I was kind of saying in the pre-show, it's kind of this thing that I think it's hard to talk about, because when you're in these situations and you see somebody who you intuit wants to have sex with you, a lot of times when you're in a hypersexual space, even if you objectively understand you're not attracted to this person, you don't want to do this really, you're not really even into this person like that, but you know that they want that from you, and sex is something that you have established as your value, it's very easy for you to be in situations where you, without even really understanding why, end up having sex with people.
Right.
And the cycle just kind of continues.
When we were, about that groomer and how, you know, he was all, oh yeah, well, she was willing. And I couldn't help but think about how good of an actor I was.
Yep.
You know, there were so many people that I am like 100% positive are also positive that I totally wanted it. I mean, I was outwardly, you know, consenting enthusiastically, but internally, I knew for a fact I did not want to do this.
Yeah.
So it's hard. It's rough.
Yeah. I think it's important to say that out loud because I think a lot of us don't understand to the degree at which we've adjusted to narratives about ourselves that aren't necessarily reflective of who we are. You know, like I know that like I knew when I knew someone wanted to have sex with me and I listened to them talk, I knew how I needed to act in order to do that. I can't really compare that to me now, who I don't have sex with people I don't, you know, have an interest in. I don't, I can acknowledge that somebody wants to have sex with me and, you know, be flattered by it, but say no. But that's because I now have a fuller understanding of myself and recognize that the value I have is more than just the sex that I can perform. So I really appreciate you sharing that particular point. I really do. Hello.
I've always felt that my perspective is very different because I grew up very Catholic and very, you know, I grew up in a huge Latino family. So for me, addressing sexual assault and things that happened to me when I was younger was very hard because that whole idea of you know, grieve what you sow, you know, it makes, you know, someone like me who I went through horrible experiences that made me feel very isolated and alone when I desperately wanted my family to just accept me and accept what I went through. And it made it hard for me to genuinely come out. And I guess to go more in depth into it, I was groomed online by someone who claimed to be around my age, which was about 12 years old. And it was very hard for me to distinguish, you know, is this a real person or is this someone who is lying to me? But I desperately wanted to be accepted and feel loved. And my parents ended up finding out. And instead of being extremely supportive or extremely defensive of that person who was doing those horrible things to me, they were just blaming it all on me.
Wow.
And they essentially made me feel I was going to go to jail, that I was going to be considered a sex offender.
Wow.
For doing these things when I didn't know what I was doing. I genuinely thought that person loved me and wanted, you know, to care for me. And instead I felt with years of resentment and pent up aggression against like everyone around me. And for years as I got older, I felt isolated and, you know, to some degree very agoraphobic. Like I genuinely don't being around people, and it genuinely has put a detriment in my life. And I never was supported and gotten therapy until I had to go to a mental hospital. And that's when everyone started genuinely taking my problems seriously. And now I'm at that point in my life where I'm starting to see things for what they were. And it's hard for me to kind of move on when my family still hasn't moved on from that. And it's just something that I feel I'm not sure how to navigate as someone who's still very young and still experiences that trauma to this day.
Could I ask you if, let's just say that you had the most ideal family situation ever with understanding your parents who you could speak to, what would you have appreciated hearing from your family instead of what they said?
That everything's going to be okay, and that, you know, we're going to find this person and we're going to deal with this, and we're going to make that everything that happened wasn't your fault. Because they're never gonna see it that way. Because again, it's such a problem being a person of color, that it no matter what you kind of do, and that's being extremely hypersexual, they're going to see you're asking for it. And I hate that has to be, something that is accepted within my community and in a lot of people's community. I just wish that there was a way to shift that perspective in a way to blame the predator for doing things to, a lot of people, myself.
What do you theorize is behind people's desire to put blame on you, but not the predator, especially from the context of somebody who was raised very, very Catholic? What do you think is behind that?
I honestly believe that it's the stigma that, religion, honestly. Even though I'm still religious to this day, I still believe that that whole idea of you're supposed to wait till sex before marriage, and just the idea of, oh, you had sex with someone that you didn't even know, or you were having, a sexual conversation with someone that you didn't actually have. And it makes it very hard to just kind of really explain yourself.
So that's the last call I'm going to play for you guys. And as you guys heard, there are so many commonalities between a lot of these stories. There are actually several more calls that were part of this episode. Again, you can find that podcast anywhere podcasts can be found. It's called True Tea with Kat Black, and there are over 15 episodes of my perspective and others right now available for you to download. Additionally, if you ever want to hear the full call-in shows that are completely unedited and honestly quite a bit all over the place, but still interesting to listen to, you can always find those archived on my Patreon, where they are available for every one of my Patreon members. It was so interesting listening to people who were so different from me tell the same exact story of my own experiences. I think that is the power of having these conversations, no matter how hard they are. And I wanted to thank everyone who called in yet again for giving me your perspective, your truth, your vulnerability, because it is really helpful to other people. So now it's your turn to join the conversation. I want to hear from people across the spectrum about their own experiences with hypersexuality, or their experiences with people in their life who are currently experiencing it. I think that these conversations are, once again, incredibly productive and cathartic for people who are survivors. And I think that these conversations are a really big part of how we get further in society. Now, if you read my community page, you already know that the podcast is in a hiatus currently. I'm still trying to figure out the most productive ways to use the podcast to have these conversations. A lot of you guys seem to like this type of video for the previous episode that I did, so I thought that I would do it for this one. And if you guys like this one, I'll do it for more in the future. I am in an experimental place on my YouTube channel. Thank you so much for bearing with me. It's starting to feel really, really good. Anyway, until next time, bye.